entirety. Shavuot, Zman Matan Toratenu, the time when Hashem gave us the Torah. This is the time when Hashem chose us as a nation. As it says in Parasha Yitro in Perek Yutet, chapter 19, and with a little bit of introduction before the Psukim, after Hashem reminded us of the miracles and the protection he gave us when taking us out of Mitzrayim, Hashem carried on saying, now, if you will listen to me and keep my covenant through keeping the Torah, you will be a precious treasure to me among all the people. You shall be to me a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation, a mamlechet kohanim, a nation of kohanim, of priests, the kingdom of priests, vegoy kadosh, and a holy nation and a holy people. And so he gave us the Torah, therefore giving us the potential to become holy. Initially, Hashem created the world with Hashamayim Shamayim la Hashem ve'haaretz natan livnei Adam. That is from Tehillim, chapter 115, where Hashem says that the heavens are the heavens of God, but he has given the earth to the children of humankind, meaning heavens and earth did not and could not merge. Our avot, our forefathers, could still draw godliness into this world through the mitzvot they kept. But as they were not a tzivui, a commandment, and therefore they were keeping it, and people after them were keeping it because it was a command from God, but rather based on their prophetic vision, the spirituality that was drawn down was not enduring. At Har Sinai, the marriage between Hashem and the Jewish people took place. The Medrash tells us that Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, a rocky and plain mountain, burst forth with flowers, setting the perfect background for the marriage. The wedding is on Torah. Hence, Shavuot is also referred to as the festival, the Chag of the giving of the Torah. Just like a groom gives the ring to the bride on their wedding day, Hashem gave us the Torah. And like a ring embraces a finger and surrounds a finger, Hashem embraces us with his holy Torah and surrounds us. Shavuot is a time when we renew our commitment by accepting the Torah all over again. We, Bnei Israel, accepted the ring, the Torah, with the words Na'aseh v'nishma. We will keep it and we will learn from it. We will learn about it. The giving and acceptance of the Torah brought the effect of our relationship being able to have an impact in the world, to be able to draw down the holiness. It brought a whole new realm, just like in a marriage when the gates and potential for a deeper relationship are open. I'm going to share with you a Hasidic concept where Hashem states that the lower realms, the lower world will ascend to higher realms and the higher realms will descend to the lower. That means that we, with our work here, can raise ourselves to meet the godliness, as the godliness will descend and meet us. The Torah states that Hashem descended upon Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and so heavens and earth met. Hashem opened for us, as I said, the potential for spirituality and physicality to merge through our actions. He created a bridge between the upper and lower worlds, causing Yisarusa de la Eila, which is an awakening from above, which would bring about the Yisarusa de Letata, an awakening from below, therefore allowing us to act in heaven, in Hashem's image, by initiating our conversation with Hashem, which then brings a response from above. And of course, this is our tefillot. And whether it is tefillot coming from a siddur, or your own thoughts within that tefillot, your own personal prayers, it is all part of that isarusa deletata, that arousing from below. This is the difference between Torah and Tefillah. Learning of the learning of the Torah and of prayers. Torah is from above to below. And Tefillah is an awakening from below, reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot states that the world stands on three pillars. The pillar of Torah, the pillar of Avodah, which is Tefillah, and the pillar of Gemilut Chasadim, of acts of kindness. Torah is a drawing down of spirituality from above to below, which we, Am Yisrael, have embraced in its totality when we said and continue to say every Shavuot, Naaseh v'nishma. It's very, very interesting that there has been a huge shift in education. I've been working very closely with a number of people in what was the redrafting of the Pikuach framework for inspection. Parallel to that, unbeknownst to us, Ofsted had also reviewed their framework to include well-being. Of course, as a Jewish body, part of well-being, we recognize that part of well-being is actually the understanding of spirituality, the understanding, the deeper connection. And so now we are working with schools in supporting them to fine-tune and to draw down and to focus and to be able to explain in what way is the Judaism they are teaching, the Yiddishkeit they are teaching in schools, enabling, facilitating our children to be able to become aware of spirituality. With my therapeutic hat on, it's really interesting to look at the history of and development of counseling and how initially people like Carl Rogers, who is a big name in an American psychologist, who denied the importance of spirituality in the well-being. But his later books, towards the end of his life, there is an absolute solid recognition of the importance of connecting with the higher being. Spirituality, I'm not talking Lavdafka, not specifically as having to be a religious spirituality, but the need to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And so we said to Hashem, we will keep the Torah, whether we understand it or not, and we will learn from it. We will learn its lessons, and we will benefit from that drawing down of the spiritual connection. We do so simply because Hashem told us to do so. Now it is the tzivui, and now by following the commandments, we're able to modify and transform the world we live in, and follow suit, and do so out of love and respect from Hashem. The second pillar is tefillah, which is prayers. It is an awakening from below, where we connect to Hashem through our deepest level, the level of our prayers, and as the famous song from Sarit Hadad says, "K'shehalev bocheh rak Elokim shomea," when the heart cries out, only God hears. God is the only one that can hear what's going on inside us. We pour our hearts to Hashem, our Father in heaven, and this causes him to respond and protect us. I was given a book by one of the teachers in my school, a non-Jewish lady who is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful human being. And in this book, there was a little saying that says, when we look in the mirror, we only see our reflection. We only see our outside, when most of what is happening with us is happening inside. But Hashem reads what's going on inside us, and our words of tefillah is what connects us to him. And of course, the third pillar, the Masim Tovim, the good deeds. The Torah is not an intellectual exercise, but an action plan. If I sit from today till tomorrow thinking that I want to give tzedakah and help families and help people who I know need, okay, and I work out how I'm going to give the money, if I'm going to use PayPal or whether I'm going to do a bank transfer, and I work out how much money I'm going to give, unless I actually do it, the people who need the money won't benefit from it, okay? While an action stays as a thought, then it doesn't benefit anybody. And in fact, the Torah was given to human beings in this world. The Jewish people thought that they needed to be asleep to receive the Torah, and it says that when Hashem descended on Har Sinai, the Jewish people were all asleep because they thought he would come through a dream. And they made a mistake because the Torah is given in this world to be kept in this world. One thing that I took upon myself when my father passed away, and something that I was never able to do, was to count the Omer with a bracha all the way through. But somehow the strength and the encouragement that I felt inside to be able to count the Omer on his behalf has meant that for the last 7 years, I have managed to count the Omer every time. Masim Tovim is the physical manifestation of bringing together that Isarusa de Leil, the awakening from above, which is Torah, and this Isarusa de Letanta, which is the awakening from below, which is Tefillah. Hashem gave us a roadmap of how to bring spirituality into the world. After all, we are a Goy Kadosh, we are a holy nation, and our job is to draw down Hashem's presence into this world through our thoughts, speech, and action. That's where you can see as a parallel on the PowerPoint next to Torah Avodah and Gemilut Chasadim. The Medrash states that during the giving of the Torah, all the neshamot, all the souls of all the Jewish people were present. Those that were ever going to be born were there. Therefore, Hashem spoke to each and every one of us. We were there. We were there individually and as a nation. Though we all experienced the same giving of the Torah, received the same Torah in its entirety, hearing the same words, we're all individuals and will connect to the Torah in our own unique way. As a therapist, I find that one of the biggest issues that can cause mental health disturbances is when people believe themselves not to be good enough and try to browbeat themselves into becoming someone else. We were each created the way Hashem wants us to be. Shasani called Turkey. Hashem has created us with all our, providing for all our needs, and recognizing that we need to be who we are meant to be. Whereas there would have only, where those people would only have kind words to tell others, they continuously denigrate themselves. They put themselves down and their uniqueness because they think they'd be better off if they were like someone else. It's as if there's a little voice that sits on our shoulders, either continuously creating self-doubt or acting as a harsh critic until the person is flooded with anxiety and fear. When we stood at Har Sinai, Hashem spoke to each one of us individually and collectively, as I said, because he believes in us more than we believe in ourselves. One thing I always remind my kids in school is when we say Modeh Ani in the mornings and we thank Hashem for returning our neshamot, returning our souls, we finish the sentence with the words, Rabbah emunatecha, great is his belief in us. He believes in us. Every morning when we wake up, we need to remind ourselves that Hashem gives us the strength to fulfill that he gave to us at Har Sinai. At Har Sinai, Hashem spoke to every neshama of every Jewish person that would ever exist. The truth that comes with it is that is renewed each Shavuot as we stand again together, Ish Echad Belev Echad, as one person with one heart. Just like the organs and limbs of a human body are different and serve different purposes, yet for the body to be healthy, they need to work in synergy. We stand to receive the Torah together each year as our unique individual self. We hear the same words, the same directive, and yet we connect with Hashem in our own individual way, making each of the 630 mitzvot our own and fulfilling them through our individual and unique process of thought, speech, and action, making this world ready for Mashiach. This is how I believe we've strengthened that rope made out of 613 strands that connect us to our Father, our King, building trust and belief. Yes, Hashem spoke to me at Sinai. He spoke individually to every single one of us. And now we stand on the eve of Shavuot, about to accept the Torah all over again. Shavuot is a time when we reconnect to Hashem and his words of Torah. This is how we know that we can see the night through. For as Benny Friedman said, a Yid understands that Hashem has a plan and that it's all that it takes to make it through. A Yid, a Jew, perseveres with positivity and joy, simcha, until we merge heavens and earth and have our third Beit HaMikdash built in our days. Let me just play the song, finish off with how we started.
Cause the Yid never breaks and the Yid never bends and the Yid never gives up in the night. A Yid perseveres through the deepest despairs. His emunah strengthens him for the fight, and the Yid understands that Hashem has a plan, and that's all it takes to make it through. His Tate loves him, that's what a Yid holds on to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther, for joining us, Rebbitzin. And thank you for your wonderful words. I wish you a Chag Sameach. And it's customary amongst Hasidim, they always used to wish that you should have a Kabbalat Torah, that you should receive the Torah with simcha, with joy, and with pnimiut, which means that it should be internalized as well. So to help us to do that, I now hand over to my dear colleague, Rabbi Dansky, who I've also made a co-host. So hopefully you should be able to control everything. And over to you, Rabbi Dansky.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be here speaking to you tonight, albeit remotely via Zoom. And I hope that we enjoy our time together. Just before I start, first of all, this shiur is learnt together with you in the merit of Harav Yirmiyahu Pesach ben Kreina Devora, a rabbi in our area who has been hurt very badly today, as well as, just hold on a second, I'm just going to make this a bit louder for everyone, as well as to our brothers and sisters in Israel who are going through a really, really difficult time. So our prayers and our thoughts are with them and with the family of Harav Yirmiyahu Pesach, and hopefully he has a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery. So we all know that Shavuot is Zman Matan Torah Seinu, the time of the giving of the Torah. And for many of us, we perceive that, certainly for me, for many years, I perceived the study of Torah as being a cerebral thing, as being a exercise in understanding, in thinking, in logic, It's about knowing things, about knowing what the Torah says. And the more we know of the Torah, we know the more reward we're going to get in the next world. But what I'd like to share with you today is some Kabbalistic stories which are absolutely enlightening in terms of what it is that we're trying to achieve when we study Torah, touching the flames of spirituality, and how we can touch those flames without getting burnt. Because at the end of the day, that's really what the Torah is all about. So what I'd like to share with you first is a story which is brought in the Talmud Chagiga. And the Talmud says as follows, I'm going to read it to you. The sages taught, and in fact, what I will do is I will share this with you so you can have a look at what I'm doing here. Okay, all right, so you should be able to share with me over here, right? I'm not sure why I'm seeing this. There we go. The sages taught. 4 people entered the orchard, the Pardes. What does that mean? So the translation tells that they dealt with the loftiest secrets of Torah.
How was it?
And they are as follows. These are the 4 people: Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, an apostate whose name was Elisha ben Avuya, and Rabbi Akiva. So what happened to them? Let's see. Ben Azai glimpsed the divine presence, and when he received that extension and connection to God, he died. Ben Zoma, the other sage, glimpsed at the divine presence and was harmed. He lost his mind. Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, he saw this greatness of God and he became a heretic. And Rabbi Akiva, the last of the 4 sages, went in peace and came out in peace. What a fascinating story. It doesn't tell us what was in the Pardes, which we're translating as an orchard, but there's a basic question which needs to be asked, and that is as follows. The Talmud tells us clearly in other places that a person should never put himself into danger. In fact, we know that a Talmud Chacham, a sage, shouldn't ever walk around alone at night in case he gets attacked. If that is the case, why did these 4 sages go and endanger themselves spiritually and physically by diving into this Pardes, into the secrets of the Torah? There are some who say that they said God's ineffable name. There are others who said that they learned the story of the Merkava, the chariot of God's glory. There are others who say, and we're going to go with this explanation, that they looked into the depths of the Torah. But why did they do that if this was such a dangerous thing? What were they trying to achieve by going into this Pardes, into this orchard? And I never really properly understood this Talmud. If this is something which is so incredibly dangerous, why do it? Why get involved? So in order to answer this question, I want to go and show you another Gemara, a beautiful Gemara which I saw. And perhaps we can understand it from there. This is the next piece of Talmud. The sages taught, when Rabbi Eliezer fell sick. Now we're talking about Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. So he was living during the period of time just after and during the destruction of the temple. And it was he who had learned from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the great sage who saved Yavne from destruction. So Rabbi Eliezer's colleague was Rabbi Yoshua, and his students were very, very, very important students. And chief among Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus' students was a man called Rabbi Akiva. Remember the Rabbi Akiva that we mentioned previously, one of the 4 who entered into the Pardes, into this orchard of spirituality, which altered the lives of those 4 sages so incredibly. So when Rabbi Eliezer fell ill, his students entered to visit him. And they said to him, "Teach us the paths of life. guidelines by which to live, so that we will therefore merit the life of the world to come. So they saw that Rabbi Eliezer was very unwell, that he was on his deathbed, and they decided to ask him the most important of questions. They said to him, what is it that we need to do if we are going to go and enter into the next world? On the one hand, you would have thought, you know something, that's a great question. If I had the answer to that, things would be absolutely fantastic for me to know exactly what to do to get into the next world. But the truth is that we all know what to do. First of all, we know that if we want to get into the next world, we're supposed to keep the mitzvot. We're supposed to do what the Torah tells us to do. The second question, which is asked by Rav Yecheskel Landa. Now, Rav Yecheskel Landa, again, he was a rabbi in Prague. He lived after the Shabtai Tzvi revolution, where he said, Shabtai Tzvi said he was the Messiah, and the terrible results of that and the persecution which resulted from him being a false Messiah, and the hopes of the Jewish people were completely dashed. Now, after that generation, there came a man called Rav Yonason Eibeshitz. Rav Yonason Eibeshitz, although he was a great rabbi and he wrote beautiful books, he also was very involved in Kabbalah. And because he was so involved in Kabbalistic ideas, he had an opponent in Holland, a man called Rav Yaakov Emden. And the man who arbitrated and mediated between these two factions, between Rav Yaakov Emden and Rabbi Yecheskel Landa, and Rav Yonason Eibeshitz, was Rav Yecheskel Landa. Now, he wrote various books. He wrote the Noda B'Yehuda response. He wrote the Dagul Merevava, and he also wrote a commentary on the Talmud called the Tzlach. And he asks the following question. He says, hold on a second. We are told clearly in Ethics of Our Fathers that a person is not allowed to go and do what a person should not allowed, but you should not go and serve your master God in order to receive rewards. You should go and serve God only in order not to receive rewards. If that's the case, why is it that they are asking him, give us the keys to heaven? You're not supposed to ask for the keys to heaven. These were great sages. They weren't people who were learning Torah in order to have some sort of an ulterior motive. They weren't doing it so that people would call them rabbi or that they would bow and scrape before them, because back in the day, that's what they used to do. I'm not sure whether they do that so much anymore, but back in the day, that's what they used to do. That's not why they were studying. They were studying lishma, for the sake of Torah itself. That's the case. What sort of question is this to ask Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol? What sort of question is this to say to him, how are we going to get the keys to heaven? So Rav Yecheskel Landau says, there's one thing that we just don't understand. There's one thing that we simply do not understand. And that is what heaven is about. So if I was, if you can unmute yourself a little bit, and we think about what heaven is about, what heaven looks like. Let's get a bit of audience participation. What do you think heaven looks like? So if you can, you can put up your hand, tell me, what do you think happens in heaven? Has anybody got any ideas as to what they think happens in heaven? Any ideas?
Peace and tranquility.
Okay, people are going to sit in peace and tranquility. We're going to finally feel peace. Absolutely. I have no doubt that we're going to feel peace. Okay, what else is going to happen in heaven? Yes.
I think it's going to be much the same as it is here, but with less stress.
Okay, we're going to live the life up in heaven with less stress. Okay, fair enough. There was a rabbi who had a dream. There's a joke, and he came to this this man, and he said to him, "Listen, Jeff," he says, "I've got good news and bad news." He says, "What's the good news?" He says, "I had a dream about heaven, and I can tell you that they have a beautiful course and a golf course in heaven." He says, "That's the good news." So Jeff says to the rabbi, he says, "What's the bad news?" The rabbi says to him, "You're teeing off tomorrow." The truth is that, some people think about, heaven as the great, a golf course in the sky, or we're living in clouds. But the truth is, and this is the most important thing, is, and with this we need to give a bit of an introduction. And the introduction is really all about the concept of pleasure. As we go through life, we start off with pleasures which are incredibly attainable, tangible, and physical. So if you think about a baby, what does a baby experience as joy? When they're being held by their mother, or when they're being fed by their mother. Food makes them feel good. The child starts to grow up, and as they grow up, they start to change what gives them pleasure. Yes, sweets give them pleasure, and that's fun, but playing sports starts to become more important to the child. And why is that? Because there are now two elements. There's a physical element, and together with that physical element, there's an element which is slightly removed from physicality, which is the achievement of the child when he saves a goal, or when he scores a goal, or that feeling of enjoyment and adrenaline that the child gets from the sport. Child gets older, and the child becomes an adolescent, and then he is attracted to others, and then it becomes a question of creating love and attachment. And again, the love has a physical element, but the love also has a spiritual element, a sense of connecting to somebody else. And then that teenager turns into an adult, and then they start to pursue the wealth and money. And that wealth and money is physical, but more important than the wealth and the money is what? Is the feeling of achievement. Look who I am because I've got so much money. Look who I am because I have so many possessions. Then as they get older, the requests become more and more abstract, becomes a request for honor, a request for respect, a need to feel self-actualized, that I have achieved all the things that I said that I wanted to achieve in my life. And as you notice, you started off with the most physical of things, milk. And you move from there to the most abstract of things, attaining and feeling a sense of achievement in life. With that, we can come to understand that really the greatest pleasure that we can achieve in life is something which lasts forever. The longer it lasts, the better the pleasure is. So if you think about a chocolate, chocolates are great, but chocolates are gone within a minute or a minute and a half, especially if you're hungry. A beer is wonderful, or a glass of whiskey is fantastic, but that glass of whiskey is going to disappear. And that's essentially why people become clever and clever about what they look for in order to have a sense of pleasure in life, and why it moves away from the milk all the way to questions about achievement, because they realize that that's far longer lasting. Now, if you think about what's the most long lasting thing that exists within the whole world, what is the most long lasting thing?
Yeah.
God. God and godliness is something which does not end. It is Ein Sof. We describe God as being without any end. And therefore, what we would say as the greatest pleasure of all time, the greatest pleasure that you can possibly achieve is connection to the Almighty. Dveikut Bashem, connection to God, is the greatest pleasure, because that pleasure will last and last and last and last and last and last for the end of all eternity. This is Olam Haba. That is what the next world is about, says Rabbi Yechezkel Landau. That is the essence of what we're looking at. And if you thought that Jewish people were only about the next world, you would be wrong. First of all, you know how rabbis like their cholent and how much they enjoy a good whiskey. But more than that, it's more than that. The truth is that what we want and what we should be going for is the greatest hedonistic pleasure that we can possibly get in all time. In Shir HaShirim, in Song of Songs, Solomon said the following thing. I'm going to share this with you. Yeah. And it's the most beautiful verse, which is badly misunderstood, obviously. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to share this with you just half a sec. Says Shlomo in Shir Hashirim, Solomon, oh, give me the kisses of your mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Ostensibly, these words are actually being given across from the shepherdess to her shepherd, to her beloved shepherd. Kiss me, she says, because your kisses are more intoxicating to me than wine. Says the Malbim, that's not the explanation. It's as follows. God is the shepherd. The Jewish people are the shepherdess. And they say, oh, give me of the kisses of your mouth. Let me enjoy the experience of you, God, in this world, not in the next world. What Shlomo was searching for all of his life was this connection to God through prophecy. He was asking for that ultimate deep connection. And that, he says, is more delightful than any physical drug, any wine, any drug that was available. He is looking for this journey, for that experience, for that high. We Jewish people are hedonists, completely hedonists. We don't believe in sitting up in the mountain all the time and waiting for God to appear to us. That might work, but what we really want to do is we want to experience God in this world right here, right now. With that in mind, let's go back to the story of the sages. Rabbi Akiva goes to Rabbi Eliezer, his teacher, and he says to him, Rabbi, he says, you're about to die, but I want to know your secrets. I want to know what it is that will enable me to experience such connection to God in this world that I won't even feel the need to go into the next world. I can enjoy God to such a high experience that I can achieve paradise here. That was what Rabbi Akiva was asking. Rabbi Eliezer pushes him off. He gives him all sorts of answers. Respect your teachers, be nice to other people. He gives a lovely set of answers, but I don't believe that that's what they were asking him. And this sets Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues on a quest. Their quest to find God and to create a connection with godliness, not in the next world, but in this world. And it is therefore then that they find themselves in this orchard, in this spiritual orchard, trying to connect to God. But there's only one trouble. There's only one trouble, and that is that their minds are unable to achieve that incredible connection to God because it's too awesome for them. One dies, the other one goes mad, the third becomes an apostate. And it's only Rabbi Akiva who enters in peace and exits in peace. So where does that leave us, ladies and gentlemen? Let's stop here. Where does it leave us? We want to have that connection. We want to feel the fire of God. We want to learn Torah because this learning and this study of Torah is the greatest pleasure that we can achieve ever. Greater than love, greater than respect, greater than achievement, greater than money, greater than all the pleasures in this world. Yet we know that there are other sages far greater than ourselves who have made the attempt and who have failed. How do we achieve this sense of connection to God? Thousands of years later, after the story of Rabbi Akiva, in the 19th century, there lived a man called Rav Tzadok HaKohen from Lublin. Now, Rav Tzadok HaKohen was the new Rebbe. He was literally the Rebbe of all of Warsaw. And of Lublin, I beg your pardon, right? So he was a he started off as just a person who learned on his own. He wrote many books. He wrote a book called Leil, which is about dreams. He wrote a book called Tikkun about philosophy. He wrote a commentary on the Torah called Pri Tzaddik, which is also a very, very beautiful commentary on the Torah. But in Tikkun, he says that the word paradise, and this is something which the sages say, doesn't only mean paradise, but it's an acronym. Pei of the paradise stands for Pshat, the simple explanation of the text. Reish relates to the remez, what the text hints at. Daled relates to drash, the deeper rabbinical understanding of the text. And Samach relates to Sod, which means the secrets of the Torah, the Kabbalah. That's what the sages were looking at. Says Rav Tzadok HaKohen that these four elements don't necessarily have to be things within the study of Torah, of all of the Torah. You don't need to know the whole of the Torah on all of these four levels. What you can do is you can take any mitzvah, and in any mitzvah, you can achieve paradise. You can achieve this level which the sages, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Ben Zoma, Ben Azai, Elisha ben Avuya, and Rabbi Akiva achieved. You can achieve that by doing any mitzvah. So let's go through each one of these in turn, and we will be able to see what Rav Tzadok says. Rav Tzadok says, in every mitzvah, there is a pshat, the simple explanation of what that mitzvah means. So, for example, if I was to go and take the mitzvah, let's say, of tefillin, the mitzvah of tefillin is to put tefillin on your arm and to put tefillin on your head. So that's the mitzvah of tefillin. That is the pshat. Deeper than the pshat is the drash, what we are supposed to learn from putting on our tefillin. If you look at the commentaries or the prayer that you say before you put on your tefillin, you know that the tefillin there are supposed to be on your arm so that the concept of Shema, the concept of the oneness of God, should be something that controls our physicality, because that's our force, it's the strength of our arm. And not only that, it should be against our heart, because it's on our left-hand side. If you're a lefty, then it's on your right-hand side, but for most people, it's on their left, so that your tefillin should be against your heart, that you should feel it. You should feel Torah. And you should feel God in your everyday life. Why is it on your head? It's on your head because it should control your mind and your thoughts. That's the drush. So you've got putting the tefillin on, which is the simple explanation of what the tefillin is. What the putting on the tefillin means is an attempt to have our minds and thoughts and emotions and physical actions controlled by our will to serve God. What does it mean in terms, what does it hint at? Well, it hints at something deeper. It hints at the fact that we're making God our one and only. God wears tefillin himself, and we wear tefillin. God wears tefillin. And what does it say about on the tefillin? It says the Talmud, Mi ka'amcha Yisrael, who is like the Jewish people. We are he is our fan group, and we are his fan group. And that is supposed to make us feel something. Feel a sense of pride, feeling a sense of belonging, feeling a sense of, something, God is going to take care of me because he is looking after me. He's thinking about me all the time. That's the hint. That's what the emotions hint at. So you've got the explanation, what it is, putting on the tefillin, what it means, controlling yourself, how that feels to have that connection to Almighty. You put that all together and you think about all of those things all at once. And says Rav Tzadok HaKohen something beautiful. You come up with something which is inexpressible. There's an inexpressible feeling. It's not something that you can put into words, and it's not something that you can tell somebody else. Something that you cannot express to somebody else is a secret. It's a sword. If you tell somebody else a secret, you can be sure that 5 other people are going to know by the end of the day. But a true secret is a secret which is inexpressible. That, says Rav Tzadok, is how we can achieve paradise, the sense of connection to God, the sense of absolute joy and happiness and connectivity and connection in everything we do. Let's give another example. We light candles on Friday night. 2 candles. We know that you're supposed to light 2 candles. Why do we light 2 candles? The most basic explanation, so we understand the pshat, the simple explanation of lighting candles, is so that people don't trip over each other and hurt themselves. Shalom bayis, the value of taking care of other people in the home. Why 2 candles? Say the sages, one about shamor, which means to guard and keep the Shabbos and not do negative things which are wrong. And the other one is zachor, to remember the Shabbos day and do positive things like saying Kiddush. What is that hinting to? That's hinting to the fact that when we keep Shabbos, the light of God will literally infuse our houses. It will come into our houses and it will provide us with a sense of peace. That makes me feel safe. That makes me feel secure. That makes me feel like looking forward to Shabbos. So when I light Shabbos candles with that idea in mind, I am creating ultimate connection to God. It's not only about the doing the mitzvah. It's knowing how to do the mitzvah. It's knowing what the mitzvah means. It means knowing how the mitzvah makes you feel. And when all of that comes together, there's something indescribable. There's this advert, I'm sure that you've seen it for MasterCard, where you're going on holiday and it says, buying swimming trunks, 50 pounds, getting a snorkel, 30 pounds, So it says, seeing a beautiful sunset in Hawaii, priceless. For everything else, there's MasterCard. This is exactly the same idea. If you put all of these things together, if we really focus on the commandments which were given to us by God on Shavuot, today, tonight, you have the capacity to go and live in paradise in this world. And that is our challenge. And I challenge you, next time you say, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, or the next time you bench, or the next time you go to shul and you pray, think about what it is you're saying, thinking what it means to say these things. How does it make you feel? Every single time, be mindful, live in the moment of the mitzvah. And through that, you will have a true Kabbalat HaTorah, accepting the Torah with fire, with the Eish, with the fire which comes down from heaven. I wish you all a Chag Sameach and a beautiful, uplifting, and enlightening Yom Tov.
Shkoyach, Rabbi Dansky, thank you so much for that. Lots to digest, but we are running to schedule. So I'll hand over to Chava, who is an educator in many different forums. I have to say thank you very much because she came to my lunch and learn last week. So I'm returning the, not the favor, the professional courtesy now. And I look forward to hearing all about the lineage of King David and very appropriately for the end, all about Mashiach.
You're going to spotlight me?
Yeah, that should be done. Are you spotlighting? Oh, I'll take Rabbi Dansky off 1 sec. There.
1 second.
There we go.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I've got a bit of a hard act to follow after Rabbi Dansky and Rebbetzin Esther. I hope everybody's not too tired. If you are, just give a little bit of arms and move your arms, stand up, sit down. That's what I tell the kids when I used to teach at high school. Obviously, I know Sally, and I've had the privilege to hear Rabbi Mordechai speak. If you want to interrupt me or ask me questions, please, by all means, do. There is a handout which I will now share with you. Just 1 second, and you should be able to have the handout. 1 second. Just want to make it bigger for me so I'll be able to see the people. If you want to mute yourself, So anyone who wants to ask me something, by all means, ask me something. 1 second, this isn't exactly the screen I want to see. 1 second, I'm just going to make it a tiny bit better for me to see. Sorry, okay, we're ready to go. So today is Erev Shavuot, and on Shavuot, we're going to read the book of Ruth. Before I start my talk, I just want to say this is an amazing event, and thank you, Sally, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And Rabbi Wallenberg, I understand, is doing a fantastic job on the Cranbrook Road, Rabbi Dansky. And again, I'd like to reiterate Refuah Shlema for Rav Yirmiyahu Pesach ben Kreiner Devora, Rabbi Rafi Goodwin, who I understand is on his way home from hospital, which is great news. And we're looking forward to a peaceful Shabbos, a peaceful Yom Tov in England, in Israel, and around the world. So there is an idea that King David, the Jerusalem Talmud Chagiga 12 tells us that King David was born and he died on Shavuot. The actual wording is Atzeret, but he died on Shavuot. And we read Megillat Ruth because, like Ruth was a convert to Judaism, we are today, tomorrow, and the next day re-accepting upon ourselves the Torah and our commitment to God and the commandments. So like she took on the commandments, she was a convert to Judaism, we are reaffirming our commitment as if like we've got a renewed vigor and excitement with the commandments. The story takes place in the harvest season, and it was written by Samuel Shmuel Hanavi, the prophet, to legitimize David's birth. What on earth does that mean? David became the king of Israel. And at the time when he was going to become the king of Israel, people were asking, like, is he really Jewish? Hold on a minute. Don't we know his great-grandmother was a Moabite? Now, how did that all happen? So where should people be so nervous about Moabites coming into the Jewish people? Because there were converts all the way throughout Jewish history. If you look at source 2 on the sheet, in Deuteronomy, Parshas Kitzetzei, we read, Lo yovo Ammoni uMoavi b'kal Hashem. An Ammonite and a Moabite, this is in Deuteronomy 23:4, are not allowed to enter the congregation of the Lord. Now, it doesn't mean they can't convert. It means they are not allowed to marry in to the community. So that poses a bit of problems if Ruth was a Moabite and she married into the community. But the rest of the verse says the reason is because in the desert, when the children of Israel were in the desert, the people from Ammon and Moab, 2 nations bordering the land of Israel, the Bnei Israel had to pass through the lands, and the people, the Ammonites and Moabites, did not greet them with bread and water. Now, the rabbis at the time of the story of Ruth came up with a ruling saying, is this the ruling? Does it apply to Ammonites and Moabites? Because we can't just read the whole Torah without the rabbis helping us understand it. It's just impossible. Otherwise, there would be things like you can't bathe a calf in its mother's milk. And we say, okay, as long as I'm not cooking a cow and a baby calf in its mother's milk, that's okay. But the rabbis tell us that's not what it means. It means you cannot mix up milk, the calf's milk, and the cow's milk with meat. So we have to get the rabbis to interpret the law. We can't take everything completely literally, or an eye for an eye. We don't believe in, someone damages your eye, we'll just scoop out someone else's eye. That's not acceptable. So the rabbis had to help us interpret the law. The rabbis at the time of the story of Ruth were discussing this law, and they said, hold on a minute, it doesn't apply to women, it only applies to men. Now, there were lots of people who were not keen on this. They were like, well, today we've got modern rulings by the rabbis, for example, on modern issues, for example, surrogacy or IVF. People don't really want to be the first person who goes through IVF in the Jewish community. They don't want to be, in inverted commas, that guinea pig. They don't want to put their name and say, this person was the first Jewish person who undertook what the rabbi said. You just want to sort of like, let's be the 10th person. I mean, some people are strong and they want to be the trailblazers. So in the story, people were not so happy about it. And even furthermore, the Midrash tells us that the day after Boaz and Ruth got married, he died. And the people were like, see, I told you he did the wrong thing. He sort of got hit by a bolt of lightning. So we're not keen on this. They didn't have the the strength to believe the words of the rabbis. Okay, so as I go along, please interrupt me if you've got any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go, and I'll stop every so often to say if anybody's got me. We know that the book of Ruth, it doesn't have any laws, although we do learn the laws of conversion from the story. But we know towards the end of the book, it's only 4 chapters. At the end of the book, we read all about the genealogy of King David. So the rabbis tell us it was written by Samuel to explain to us the genealogy of David. And if you look at source 4, Ruth married Boaz. They had a son. His name was Obed. He was the father of Yishai, Jesse, and then he became the father to David. And it goes all the way back and says, this is the genealogy of David. Peretz beget Chetzron, Chetzron beget Ram, Ram beget Aminadav, and then Aminadav begot Nachshon, Nachshon, Salmon, Salmon, Boaz, Boaz, Obed, and Obed begot Yishai, and Yishai begot David. All those verses, 17 to 22, are telling us, and it's literally like, hello, hello, we want to tell you the genealogy of David. Now, King David comes from what could only be described as a slightly seedy origins. Now, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the handout, and you can have the whole weekend to look at it. But I've drawn a very nice table about, I'm just going to make it smaller so you can get it on, so you can see it on the page. If I can get this 1 second, is it not going on the page? 1 second, why is this not happening? Oh yeah, see. I'm sorry that it's smaller, but if you've got the handout printed, you can see it. And I'm going to point with my pointer. Okay, so we've got Abraham over there. Can you see my pointer? Someone give me a thumbs up, yeah? So Abraham over there, he has Isaac, Jacob, and they have Jacob has the 12 tribes, Yaakov has the 12 tribes, and Judah is the forebearer of King David. This is the lineage we read before: Peretz, Chetzron, Ram, Aminadav, Nachshon, Shalma, and Boaz. So we can see where he comes from. Very nice lineage, you might say. The problem is David's birth was surrounded by strange, I could only say strange sexual encounters. That's basically what I'll say. So you're going to have loads of interesting reading. You're going to have loads of things to do. Oh, Sally wants to say something. Do you want to unmute yourself? I'm sorry?
Who was David's mother?
Okay, so the Midrash tells us, that Talmud tells us his mother was called Nitseves bas Adael. But I'm actually not going to focus too much on her because she's like a whole story in her own right. You'll have to invite me back next year or another time. We'll talk about Nitseves bas Adael. But I wrote her name over here. So if you want to Google her name, Nitseves bas Adael. Okay, very strange story. I'll give you a little taster about her life in a minute. Now, I've drawn some little numbers and I've said here, there's a few strange liaisons. Now, the first one I'd like to talk to is about the birth. There's like a liaison between Judah, Yehuda, and Tamar. Now, some of you might be familiar with that. This is a very strange story because if you look at the source 4, we can see that it's begging us to look backwards. These are the generations of Peretz. What is significant about Peretz? Let's go back to Peretz's birth. So I put a little 1 there. We'll look back at the family tree again, and you've all got homework to do over the next couple of days, and you can listen back and think more about the story. Okay, I'm literally going to scrape the iceberg of these stories, because each story itself is an hour or 2 by itself. Okay, so we're up to source 5. I'm going to make it bigger. Okay, Judah, here comes the story. Judah is married to a lady. They have 3 sons. The sons are supposed to get married. So the first son, his name is Er, and he marries this woman. Her name is Tamar. For some reason, they don't have children. Not going into too much detail. Look it up in Genesis. And she has to get married to Er's brother called Onan, because we have this concept of levirate marriage, where if a man dies without a child, his brother would marry the widow in order to perpetuate his dead brother's name. Now, I know there's a lot of complications. As I said, you can invite me back. I don't mind, or we can make Rabbi Wallenberg give a class on it another time. So now, the first brother dies. His name's Er. The second brother marries Tamar. His name's Onan, and he dies. So there's a third brother, and his name is Shelah. Now, the dad, Judah, was not too keen on letting Shelah marry his younger son. He's thinking, hold on a minute, she's got a bit of a witchy background, not so keen. Meanwhile, Tamar is not free to marry anyone else. So she's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. She, according to the Midrash, had this idea that she had like a prophecy that kings would come from her. And she felt, I have to marry into the Judah family and I have to have a child with Judah. So she marries, so she's not allowed to marry Shelah. She's not allowed to marry anyone else. What does she do? She dresses herself up. This is Genesis chapter 38, Bereshit chapter 38. She dresses herself up as a prostitute and she goes and sits at crossroads. And there she is, sitting at the crossroads, minding her own business, hoping and waiting for Judah to come past. Judah comes past and thinks to himself, well, this must be a prostitute. Now, there are loads of questions on this story, but what happens is he sees her, source 5, he sees her, she sits in her widow's clothing and she dresses up like a prostitute. Verse 15, when Judah saw her, she sees he's a harlot and she covered her face, okay? He detoured to her by the roadside and said, let me spend a bit of time with you, because he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. As I said, come back for full details on that story. Now, Tamar is not criticized. What happens here is she gets pregnant and she has a child. She has twins, actually, called Peretz. And Peretz then becomes the great-great-great-great-grandfather of Boaz. Strange? Absolutely strange. How is it possible King David's lineage goes back to his great-great-great-great-grandmother dressing up as a prostitute and his great-great-great-great-grandfather stopping and saying, you know, can I hang out with you by the roadside? It's like shocking. Genesis 38, essential reading, but read it with like some commentators because the story itself is like strange and I've just told it to you. Okay, so I'm just going to pause there. If anyone's got any questions, we can't go into major details of the story because it's already 7:42 and everybody else ran out of time, so I've got to do the same. Anybody wants to say anything? Okay, fantastic. Okay, you can ask me questions later. I'll stay on at the end. So source 6, the Zohar tells us, mystical sources, there were 2 women, Tamar, the woman in the story who dressed up as a prostitute, and Ruth, from who the line of Judah was built. They are the ancestors they are part of Judah's lineage. And from there, we have King David, King Solomon, and ultimately the Messiah. Let's look at the story of Ruth, which we're going to read on Shavuot. Now, this is a very strange story. Ruth is a Moabite princess. She marries Machlon. Machlon dies, and she is brought back to the land of Israel. She follows Naomi, and she says, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. And Naomi says to her, listen, what you need to do is you need to marry someone who's related to my ex-husband, my husband that died, and you're supposed to marry him. So it's a complicated story. Anyway, what does she do? She says to Ruth, you know what you want to do? Hang around in Boaz's fields. She hangs around in Boaz's fields. And when the time is right, Naomi says to Ruth, go in the night. I know Boaz is going to be there. He's going to be at the threshing fields. And I can see Martin is nodding his head. He's familiar with the story. Source 7. Does somebody want to say something?
Yeah. I've often thought of this. Yes.
Okay, she comes. She lies at the feet of Boaz, and in the middle of the night, he's like shocked. What is going on? Source 7. And he says, who are you? And she says, I'm Ruth, your handmaid. Spread your skirts over your handmaid, for you are my redeemer, i.e., you should marry me. Now, there is an idea that he sort of exercised self-control and he sort of repaired the damage of his ancestor, Judah, who couldn't, I don't want to say control himself, and strange story. Why is this part of King David's lineage? Why does he come from his great-grandmother and his great-grandfather, middle of the night, threshing floor? Strange stories. We're all agreeing they're strange stories, right? Now, I want to show you a word in the story in Hebrew. Over here. It says here, I'm going to just highlight it if I can. Whoops, 1 second. Vatavo balat. She came secretly, stealthily. Now look at that word, balat. It sounds a lot like a character in the book of Genesis called Lot. Okay, Lot, balot, balat, okay, Lot. Now Al-Sheikh, one of the commentators, tells us, connects Ruth acting like the daughter of Lot. Now, let's remember the story of Lot. These are also part of David's genealogy, but on the other side. I'm just going to scroll back down to the story, to the little, to the family tree. Now, here's Lot. If you can see the little X marks the spot. Lot.
Well, there's Ruth.
Right. It was married. Well, he had a physical relationship with his 2 daughters, because what happened was Lot was in Sodom. Sodom was being destroyed. The 2 daughters are seeing, what on earth is going on? We are the only people alive. They saw the world around them explode in sulfur and ashes. And they thought, if we don't have a child, this is going to be the end of the world, quite literally, apocalyptical. So they think to themselves, you know what we're going to do? This is source 9 on your sheet. This is the older and younger. So these are his, it was so hard to draw this family tree, by the way. These are his daughters, but he also fathered a child together with his own daughters. And the younger daughter had a child called Ammon. We'll look at that in a second. And the older daughter had a child called Moab. And then we can see Moab goes down to the line of Ruth. So Ruth comes from this strange sexual union between Lot and the older daughter. Okay?
Oh,
any questions?
Yeah, I thought Ruth was a Moabite princess. So how does she come from that line?
Because Lot had a child with his own daughter, and she called her child Moab, and that is the great-grandfather of the nation of Moab. I'm just going to go back up so you can see where the source is. So, as I said, you've got plenty of reading to do over the holidays. Okay, source 9, Genesis chapter 19. Apocalypse. The girls don't know what to do. The firstborn, the older sister, said to the younger, our father is old. There's no man in the world to be with us. There are no men. We're never going to have children. Let's make our father drink wine. We'll lie with him that we may preserve the seed of our father. They thought, our dad's old. All kids think that. Let's get ourselves pregnant, and at least we're going to be able to carry on the world. They made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in, and she lay with her father. Okay, the story carries on a little bit further, source 10. Both Lot's daughters conceived by their father. The older bore a son, and she called his name Moab in Hebrew, Vatikra Shemo Moab. Okay, what does it mean, Moab? Because it means may avi, from my father, av, abba, father. Moab, my father. What a crass name to call your child. It's like calling your child incest, like illegitimate, very strange. The younger daughter called her child Ben Ami, the son of my people. Another reference to the fact that the children were born from an incestuous relationship. This is King David's lineage. What on earth is going on? A prostitute sneaking in the middle of the night, threshing floor, Moab, Ammon, what is my father sleeping with your own father? Now the Gemara, the Talmud in Nazir tells us that the girls had pure intentions. They were intending to do something amazing. But Lot is another whole story what his intentions were, because how did he get himself into that sticky situation? After the first night, you could say, maybe. Second night, no excuses, my friend, okay? Another whole talk just on that, okay? And interestingly enough, sorry, did someone say something, Iris?
Yes, I don't think he was really aware of what had gone on the first night, so you could hardly blame him.
Okay, you're quite right that according to the simple reading of the text, it is that he didn't know what was going on, but the rabbis are not happy with his behavior at all. First of all, what did he have? What he's running away, apocalypse, and he's got wine. All he cares about is wine, although in ancient times maybe they didn't have fresh water, so they only used wine. the rabbis have a field day and they basically say, you know, he wasn't so upset. He was quite interested in having a nice time, even if it meant with his own daughters, which is really rather revolting. Anyway, the girls are not criticized really. And the Gemara tells us that as a reward, in source 12, as a reward for the elder one, taking the encouragement, saying, look, let me go first, I'm going to do this, she preceded the younger one to merit to join the Jewish nation by four generations. I'm just going to scroll back down to the bottom. Ultimately, Naamah, if you see the screen, Naamah married Shlomo, King Solomon, who is David's son, okay? And that's 4 generations earlier. So this is Ammon. Ruth comes in here, and Shlomo, Ruth's great-great-great-grandson, great-great-grandson, marries Naamah, who comes from the nation of Ammon, okay? Remember I said the younger daughter had a child, B'nai Ami, okay? As I said, you're going to have, I'm opening up a can of worms. I don't hope Rabbi Warren is going to be upset. Anyway, I'm sure he can handle it. Okay, now we've got to tie this all together. I'm not even mentioning King David's own birth, because that's like another whole discussion. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein brings the most incredible story. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein died in like in the 1980s. He was like the biggest posek in America. He's the one who gave he made the ruling that people can drink milk. So people really respected what he said. And he tells us the following story. How disgusting is it that Lot's daughters called their children Moab and Ammon, incest and illegitimate? Who would do that? Why couldn't they call their children, you know, David and Saul? Call a child anything. Why would they like raise the flag and say, guess what? We had an incestuous relationship with our dad, and that's why we called our kids incest and illegitimate? Good question. According to the story, which you can read in your own time, I'm just going to skim through it. Rav Moshe Feinstein says that one week when it was Parshas Va'era, Vayera in Bereshis, a man was speaking badly about the daughters of Lot, saying, how could they call their children incest and illegitimate? It's so disgraceful. And he was questioning how Lot's daughters merited that through their lineage, the Messiah should come from them, that Ruth, their descendant, should be the mother to David, who would become the mother to the Messiah. And they said, they're not embarrassed. He said, they're not embarrassed about their immorality. That night, this man had a dream. And Lot's, I'm not making this up, it's literally Hollywood. And Lot's 2 old women appeared to him in the night. And they had their faces covered. And they told him, we are Lot's daughters. And they told him, they heard him say that it was disgraceful what they called their children. And they said, they could have said, we have had the Immaculate Conception. But they did not say that. They disgraced themselves and said, we'll call our children my father's child, my people's child, because we do not want to pretend that we have had the virgin birth. Think about it. It's amazing. This is what Rav Moshe Feinstein says. I can't vouch for the truth of the story, but I can show you where it's written. If anybody would like to see it, you've got it in Hebrew and English on the sheet, and it's source 12. And as a result of the fact that they did not want to make themselves out to be that they had some sort of immaculate conception, they merited that through them and through their actions, the Messiah would come from them. Okay, I'm just going to pause there, and then I'm going to try and tie the ideas together. Okay, very briefly, Yishai, David himself, had a very, very strange, he was not treated as part of the family, very strange. Some people say he was illegitimate. And we can see, for example, when Samuel comes to anoint David as king in source 14, And Jesse made the 7 sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to Yishai, Jesse, God has not chosen these children. Where are your other children? And he's like, well, sort of number verse 11. There is one young boy, there is like one young guy. And Samuel says to him, bring that guy to me. I want to see him. He is the one. This one that you didn't even bring in front of me is David, because David was like out of the picture. Again, we'll have to talk about Sally. We'll talk about Nitzevas Basada El another time. The National Geographic wrote a whole article. You can look it up, December 2018. How is it possible David is such a compelling character? He started his life as a humble shepherd, and he found a dynasty, and he became a central figure in Judaism. How does he, who comes from an incestuous relationship, a prostitute relationship, sneaking to the threshing floor in the middle of the night, how does he become David, King David, David Melech Yisrael? How on earth does this happen? He started his life as a humble shepherd. Humble shepherds have to spend a lot of their time alone on the top of mountains, thinking. He had to think a lot, not just about himself, about his behavior, about other people, thinking about self-improvement. The leader, the ancestor of the Messiah has to be someone who was involved in self-improvement, thinking about other people. And don't anyone in a position of leadership dare to get haughty, that the Messiah and King David himself come from what I could only describe as seedy origins. Remember, you might have a great pedigree that you come from Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and come from the tribe of Judah, and kings are going to come from you. But remember where you came from. You can empathize with anyone else. You can think to yourselves, I came from prostitution. I came from incest. I came from sneaking in the middle of the night, threshing floors. You have to not allow yourself to think, I am so fantastic and I am greater than anyone else. Anyone coming from any situation can turn themselves around and achieve greatness. Nobody should be over haughty, certainly not King David or the Messiah. A person has to be resilient, caring and thinking about other people. And I'm just going to scroll up to source 16. I'll leave 16 out. The person who's going to be the leader should be someone who cares about everyone, whether it's Messiah or King David himself. And Theodore Roosevelt famously said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. David, being humble from the experience of his understanding his ancestors, gave him that edge. And I thought very much last year when Boris Johnson went into hospital, it was in April 2020, and he himself was fighting for his own life. He could see firsthand what the doctors and nurses were doing, and he could empathize with all the people who were going through difficult COVID situations. And how could he then say, oh, I'm not giving money to the NHS? How could he not then clap for the NHS? Okay. I also heard it said that Tony Blair in the year 2000, there was an article in The Guardian, you can look it up on the sheet, I gave the reference to it, that his own father was adopted, and Tony Blair therefore cared so much about adoption. King David and his progeny, the Messiah, have to care about everyone, the downtrodden. Nobody should think that they are so marvelous. King David should never be too haughty. Remember that you also come from humble origins, but whatever it is, you should be able, because of your ancestry, to relate to all different types of people. Moshiach, the Messiah, will be a descendant of David, and he can come from any type of upbringing, and he should be respectful and relatable to everyone. Jews, non-Jews, people come from different backgrounds. And we hope, especially with the difficult situation that's going on in the land of Israel and in England right now. We are all praying that the Messiah will come very soon. And the prophet Jeremiah says to us, in those days, at that time, God promises, we don't know when that time is, I hope it's still today, that God will cause a sprout of righteousness to sprout forth from David, and he will do justice and charity in the land. Bayamim hahem tivasha Yehuda v'Yerushalayim tishkon lavetach. In those days, Judah, the land of Israel, and Jews around the world will be saved, and may Jerusalem dwell in security. I wish each and every one of you a Chag Sameach, and I hope that this will bring something very interesting for you to look at over the festival. And when you read the book of Ruth, you'll read it with new eyes.
Thank you, Chava, so much. Thank you, Rebbetzin Esther and Rabbi Dansky. We're just on time, which is perfect. Big thank you also to the Chief Rabbi Center for Community Excellence, which helped sponsor tonight. Thank you to all those who have joined us. I'm conscious we've got half an hour till candlelighting. Sure, people have lots to do, so I think we'll sign off. Thank you once again. There will be a recording available if you want to share afterwards with people. And don't forget, certainly in Woodford, we're having Tikkun Leil from 11 till 1 tonight, so you can come in person as well if you're local. And if not, I hope everyone has a wonderful Yom Tov and a safe Yom Tov. And as everyone has mentioned, also our thoughts are very much with what's going on in the East, in our Holy Land, and there should be peace and security there as well, and our prayers should be answered. So Chag Sameach. Thank you once again to everyone for joining us and to all our presenters, and hope to see you soon.
I don't mind staying on if people want to ask any questions.
Oh, sorry, we'll leave it
I'm
on.
just saying, if you've got to go, I don't mind staying on. I'm already
yeah, right. I'm going to hide. Excuse me. I'm going to go and get ready for Yom Tov.
Rabbi, could you print that out for me? Because I don't have a printer.
Yes, sure. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to, Chava's very kindly staying on if anyone wants to continue. I am going to disappear. I'll be back at 8:30 probably to switch off. Wish you all a Chag Sameach and thank you once again.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
So if anybody wants to ask me something, because I feel that, I've said lots and lots of different things. So just want people to have the opportunity to ask questions if they want to.
However, I did ask a question on the chat. I don't know if
oh, sorry, I couldn't keep it. Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, who asked me a question? Why didn't they have children with non-Jewish men and bring them up as Jewish, as it's up to? Why didn't they have children? Who are you talking about? Why didn't they have children with non-Jewish men? Do you mean the children of the daughters of Lot?
Yeah, the two, the younger and older daughters.
It's a very complicated issue because Lot is, the children of Lot's story is almost at the time of Abraham, so almost Jews didn't exist because Abraham was the only person who discovered God and he taught Judaism to his nephew Lot. Judaism wasn't yet discovered, so to speak. They thought it was apocalyptical. They thought, as far as they could see, whatever they knew as the world was destroyed. There was no world. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So there were no men at all.
Them. They didn't have WhatsApp and Facebook. As far as they were concerned, that was the end of the world. There was no world. Do you understand what I'm saying? If they were living in antiquity, there was no radio, telephone, television. They saw the towns, the 5 towns around them, the area they lived in, it all looked like it was destroyed. How could they just thought there was no other human beings alive? It was like Armageddon. Do you understand what I'm saying? They thought there were no other males alive. And technically they weren't even Jewish anyway, because they were the children of Lot, who was the nephew of Abraham, who, followed in Abraham's ways to a certain extent. Does that answer your question, Lisa? I'm just going quiet again. Okay, anyone else want to say anything?
Sorry,
sorry, you don't want to say something? Yeah.
How do we know it's true?
How do we know what's true?
The stories that we see that have been written down, because they were written down well after they happened.
Okay, so that's a question of the stories in the Torah you're talking about.
Not the story about Ruth.
Okay, that is a much bigger question.
Of course.
The story, to me, it's not relevant whether the stories actually happened. I believe that there was a king called King David and there was a woman called Ruth. But the fact is, the rabbis preserved the tradition, whether or not some people might have the opinion, did these people exist? I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it. I believe these people did exist, but maybe the story happened slightly differently but I think there's a lot of merit in the stories themselves. And I think that every word and every nuance is important. And the fact is that Samuel wrote the book down. If we believe in prophetic transmission, Samuel wrote the book. I believe the Talmud, that Samuel wrote the book, and the book was written down. It's not a storybook. It's got layers and layers of meaning. Every character, every name, every vowel, every word that is there, every word that's missed out. And that's why we have to do lifelong learning, because every word's important. And for me, the stories, let's say, was Abraham put in the fiery furnace? I don't want to be like, does it matter? It doesn't actually matter. It's the rabbinic tradition, because the way I look at it is that they didn't have television, books and things like that. This was the way of them telling the story, and we can glean so much from the story. And as far as I'm concerned, the whole reason why is this book written, and it's begging us to go back to the story of Peretz, and it's telling us about Ruth on the threshing floor, and it's telling us Ruth comes from Moab, and all the rabbis read the words so carefully, and they look at the words carefully, and they say, what can we learn from this? Why is it all so significant? And for me, it's significant to teach us that a leader cannot just be a leader in a vacuum. It has to be that the leader has to care about each different type of person, and he shouldn't be so haughty and say to himself, I'm from aristocracy, I'm all right, Jack. You've got to care about all types of people, the orphans, the widows, the people who are born from incest, the people who are born from prostitution. You are not above repute. You come from that. And therefore, as a leader, you have to care about every type of person. Do not think that you are aristocracy and you don't care about all the nation, everybody. He also comes from a non-Jewish descent. Also, non-Jews are part of the picture. Do not. I think it's what can we learn from the story.
It's interesting because I'm supposed to be doing a talk tomorrow, and what I'm doing is the similarities between then and now.
You mean not tomorrow, Sally? Tuesday.
Oh, Tuesday. Yes, thank you, Brenda. Yeah, on Tuesday, and the similarities between Ruth's experiences, a stranger in a strange land, and people who are migrants today.
Iris, I can see your hands up. I just want to tell you something. The Torah is full of things about migrants and migrants today. And it all says, care about the ger, care about the convert, care about the stranger in the land. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. Do you know we're not allowed to oppress the land of the people from Egypt, because we have to remember we owe them a debt of gratitude because they were our host nation.
Maybe you need to go and talk to Hamas. Maybe you can solve the problem.
I'm telling you, today has really got me upset, I have to say. Iris, let's go to Iris. So I've got to go in a few minutes.
Just a humorous bit. Did I see rightly on the genealogical table that Lot's wife was called Iris?
Well, Iris or Idit, yes. There's a midrash which says her name is Iris or Iris, yeah.
Oh, it's in the midrash, right.
Yeah, it doesn't say in the Torah, it says. And by the way, David's mother is also comes from the Talmud. That it's not written in the stories anywhere what his mother's name is. His mother's another whole story. I didn't have enough time in half an hour. Anyway, I've done 40 minutes.
I thought when I saw it, I thought I must be reading this wrong.
Yeah, it's actually Irit or Idit. It's different opinions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Brenda, Jeffrey, I can't believe that you've listened to 3 on the trot and you're still on. You know, it's not. I thought, oh no, I should have gone first.
Chag Sameach to all of you. I've got to go.
Okay, Chag Sameach. Thank you, Sally. I'll send you the sheet.
Lovely, thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Yeah. One of the great beauties of Judaism is we print and we say everything in our ancestors, warts and all, everything. I'm not sure what happens in other religions, but with us, everything is included. We are not above others. We are not perfect. We're not saints. We are just human beings, and that's one of the wonderful things about it.
There are some right-wing rabbis who are very anti saying anything. You've got to say, if let's say David, he was with Bathsheba, and then you say, no, that didn't actually happen, and this is the reason why I did that. And other rabbis are like, no, we've got to learn from the story. He was human. Don't put him up on a pedestal. He was a human being, and he's a human being. And the same as he was fallible, we can be fallible. We can pick ourselves up, and we can repair the damage and reconnect to God. And I think all the stories we can learn from. Anyway, I wish you all a Chag Sameach. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Hannah. It was really good. Thank you. Bye-bye.